What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's happening with the economic calendar thus far, as we have some important data for tomorrow, because Jerome Powell is going to be giving a speech and testifying in front of the House. So I want to break down information about that, talk about some more data that's coming out, earnings, and then Tesla's important news reports. And I'm going to talk about how all of this could affect Tesla's share price and the overall markets. But before I break into devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, when it comes to Tesla, I just want to call out that Tesla got this little sell-off that continued today. We saw it sell off very aggressively yesterday, and we were expecting this to continue, and that's what we ended up seeing. Tesla continued to sell off, and we actually came down to about 178 a share, very close to that area, before we saw some buyers try to defend it, but overall Tesla is still on a downtrend. But the question is, what's going to affect this? When is Jerome Powell going to be giving his testimony, and how could this end up playing out for tomorrow? I'm going to give you guys some predictions in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about all this data. So let's break this down in a very simple manner. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, okay, 30 minutes after the market ends up opening, we have the JOLTS job openings report coming out and the JOLTS job quits. We also have wholesale inventories, which is not as important, not to mention Jerome Powell giving his testimony. This is going to be very important because whatever Jerome Powell says can shake the entire stock market. So 10 a.m. is going to be the first time to be watching for some volatility for tomorrow. And then after that, it's just around at 2 o'clock p.m. we have the Fed Beige Book basically coming out. That's also going to be another report about the economy, so that might cause some volatility as well. But that's not as significant as Jerome Powell actually speaking. Now, we also have Dowley from the Fed giving a speech, and then Kashkari giving a speech as well. But the Beige Book that's coming out will be another important report. But for now, we're going to focus more on Jerome Powell. When is he going to be speaking? What could he be saying? Tomorrow, once again, he's testifying in front of the House, giving his little speech, and simultaneously, he's going to be answering a lot of questions from the House representatives. This is going to be very important in Washington, D.C., because whatever Jerome Powell says will be important for monetary policy, and it's going to give us more information about what's going on with the Fed, how are they looking at the current interest rates, what's their plan for monetary policy, and different factors just like that. So I'll be watching for all of this. Jerome Powell also is going to be speaking about any changes that they could be looking out for during the next FOMC meeting. I'll be answering a lot of questions which could give the markets different moves. Usually what Jerome Powell says during things like this are very ambiguous things, meaning he's just going to say that, oh, we'll just react to the data, see what the data tells us. But sometimes there could be little snippets of information that could move the markets. So be very careful when he speaks. This could cause some crazy volatility in the markets. He could cause the market to bounce or even crash straight up. So wait and see what this guy ends up saying. We have to be ready for this. On top of this, so this is going to be the first thing at 10 a.m., right? At 2 p.m., we have the Beige Book coming out. That's not as insane as Jerome Powell speaking, but this could cause some volatility. That's just a book which consists of a summary of commentary on current economic conditions, giving us more information about employment numbers, more information about what the Fed looks at, and the overall economic activity for like prices and things like this in the different districts for the Federal Reserve. So this is some more data. We'll watch and see if this causes a move at 2 p.m., but I'm not going to focus on as much on that for now. Just as a reminder, after the market closed today, we had CrowdStrike, ChargePoint, Ross, and a couple of others announcing their earnings. I'll go over these first three for now. For tomorrow, we have JD, Foot Locker, and more retail coming out like Campbell's, not to mention Victoria's Secret. So we'll watch and see how this goes. For CrowdStrike, they did very, very well. They surged on earnings because they beat on EPS, they beat on revenue, which is awesome. And simultaneously, we saw some strong guidance. So the share price ended up exploding, up 21%. They also had strong guidance because they talked about their goal for 2030 of $10 billion in recurring revenues. That's good news for them. Very, very strong earnings. Awesome stuff for CrowdStrike. However, ChargePoint, is not looking as great because despite having good earnings, their margins were only about 6%. That's the gross margin that's adjusted, and which is not as great. And their overall guidance was not as strong for the fiscal 2025 at about 100 to 110 million. I'm sorry, that's for the first quarter of the fiscal 2025. Excuse me, guys. Not as strong. The margins were not as great. So as a result, this ended up sinking very, very hard. Their overall report was not as great as what we were expecting. So that came down. On the other hand, we also happened to have earnings come out from Ross. They actually did relatively well. They beat on earnings by 17 cents, and revenue also was not bad. So right here, you guys could see EPS was a beat for them. The overall expectation for EPS for 2025 was also not bad. It ended up being aligned with expectations, a little bit better. Revenue was a beat at 6.02 billion. That's above expectations, and they had better EPS. So good EPS and revenue. Guidance was pretty good, a little bit better than some expectations, and they saw 12 positive EPS revisions. So good earnings from Ross. However, the share price isn't really moving as much because the guidance maybe wasn't as strong as what they were wanting. It did beat many expectations, but sometimes stocks want like even bigger beats. So overall, not bad. I'm very proud of them for doing well, but it is what it is. The share price doesn't always follow. Sometimes that happens. Now, I went over all this news involving Tesla in the morning. There was a lot that happened. Basically, there was a fire that ended up taking place, and it's suspected to be arson that happened because another local group ended up taking credit for causing it. And that led to the power outage in the Gigafactory in Berlin, causing production to halt. And then that also had to lead to like a lot of workers to evacuate because the fire was not too far from them. This was in Southeast Germany, by the way. And with that happening, there was a lot of things going on with these, this media published letter that came out from this group that's claiming responsibility, causing Tesla to drop because of that. Elon Musk responded saying that the whole situation is just ridiculous. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on this. If you want more details on this, you could look at one of my previous videos. I went over more details. But for now, this was not the best of news. This is why Tesla ended up coming down the way it did today. But the question is, can Tesla try to bounce? At the end of the day, we saw some attempts to do so, but it wasn't really that insane. Volume is still high at about 119.4 million. So we're still seeing high volume selling followed by some buying. The short volume is going up just a little bit. We're seeing more shorting on Tesla relative to before. Despite that, RBC Capital gave Tesla an outperform rating, saying Tesla should still outperform. And you can see we tend to see tough resistance at this 182 area. There's also some resistance at 184, but it's not as strong. But make sure you watch these levels for intraday. The volume nodes. I also want to call out that the price price ratio is down on Tesla because Tesla lost a lot of strength because of the bad Chinese numbers that came out yesterday. We're still seeing a continuation of that momentum. It was so much momentum, it's still hurting Tesla right now. But finally, at the end of the day, we started to see things shift a little bit as some buyers started to come back and defend. So there is some improvements compared to yesterday, but it's still in the red, and we're hoping to see if anything changes with Jerome Powell. Wednesdays tend to be green about 48% of the time historically, so nothing too crazy. And we tend to see more volatility around 1 o'clock p.m. and also around 3 p.m. Excuse me, guys. And then finally, that's pretty much it for now. I'm not really seeing anything else that's too crazy. We did see some big orders from Tesla to both buy and sell, so kind of mixed views right here in terms of inside trades, but I'm not really seeing anything else changing. So now the question is, how will things move going forward for Tesla? How on earth is all this data going to affect us? I'll break this down in a second. But I want to let you guys know that I am not a fortune teller. I can't predict what's going to happen when Jerome Powell starts speaking. I can't tell you about what may happen as we approach his speech, but then once he speaks, who knows what he's going to say? Sometimes it's hard to predict. So I think that because a lot of the data that came out was quite decent, especially because CPI was not as bad, PCE was quite decent overall, aligned with expectations. There's a good chance that Jerome Powell won't be as hawkish, but just to be safe, you never know what could be said. If he says anything about interest rates, that will still have an effect. So looking at Tesla, we grabbed some liquidity down here at 178. We're trying to grab liquidity, and we're seeing some attempts to try to rebound a little bit. I also want to note that down here, if you zoom out all the way on the chart, Tesla's it dropped really, really hard without any sort of rebound. So seeing a rebound is a possibility. I think that's tomorrow. What's going to happen is with Tesla trying to uptrend right here, there's going to be an attempt to test 182 tomorrow. And we may even try to break past this and get closer to 184 as we open. There might be a little push coming when we open for the whole market. But then the market might reject and come back down as we approach Jerome Powell's speech starting at 10 a.m., 30 minutes after the market opens. And then after that, it all depends on Jerome Powell. If Powell, so we might pop tomorrow, then drop it back down within these zones right here. We have 182 and 184 as resistance. We have key support at 180 and 178. I think we might pop and drop approaching Jerome Powell's speech. And then once the guy opens his mouth, I think that a very big move is going to likely come. He might cause the whole market to actually bounce. If he causes the market to bounce, Tesla has potential to push right back up towards 188, so long as there's no major bad news. If we get a big rejection, Tesla starts sinking back down. If we lose support, 178 and 175 are possibilities. We could get a rug pull thanks to Powell. So it all depends on Jerome Powell from this point. Once again, guys, I am not a fortune teller. I don't know for sure, so just be very careful. For SPY, check this out on SPY, guys. We have this big downtrend that started. We're trying to rebound a little bit. We're barely at the 507s right now. So what could happen tomorrow is there might be an attempt to go a little higher towards 508, come back down, sideways price action. Then once Jerome Powell opens his mouth tomorrow at 10 a.m., he's either going to cause SPY to start pushing past 510, in my opinion. I think that we're going to make our way back up towards these imbalances up here, or he causes a big rug pull and we end up losing 505 and we come down to 502. So there could be a big drop coming thanks to Powell all the way down to 502. In case we lose 505 during any time tomorrow, there's going to be a risk of us coming down to 503.5 and 502 as the next supports. So watch supports at these two levels, 503.5 and 502 and 505. For resistance, we have 507.5, 508.5, and then 510. We may pop and drop tomorrow. Then Jerome Powell will determine if we get a big push or if we get a big drop. We'll have to wait and see. For the QQQ, it's the same thing essentially. The QQQ has come down quite a bit. We came just under 438. Now we're coming back down a little bit. So watch support at 436, 435 to 434, followed by 432. For resistance, watch 438. If we break that, we have an imbalance to fill at 440, very close to 441. We may pop a little bit towards 430, maybe a little bit higher, come back down, and then trade sideways in this range. However, if Jerome Powell gives us a big push, if Jerome Powell does the unthinkable and he causes another short squeeze, we could see the market make a full recovery and the QQQ could start pushing for 442 plus to fill this gap up here at 444. If Jerome Powell causes a rug pull, we could be coming right back down towards 430, so be very careful. I think we may end up popping a little bit, coming back down, approaching his speech, and then after his speech, who knows what's going to happen. Nvidia as well, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders like structure, not as symmetrical, not as clean, but it is possible. This is like a left shoulder. This is a double bottom making the hem. This is the right shoulder. We may see this thing pop a little bit. I think to at least 860, 866-ish around here where this wick is. We could test this and then come back down. And then Jerome Powell will determine if we continue to push back up to break our all-time high, reach all-time highs to 877 and break to 880. If we do break that, I think 900 is a real possibility. Or are we going to come back down after Jerome Powell's speech? We might push when we open, remember, come back down. And then when Jerome starts speaking, when Powell opens his mouth, if we get the rug pull, 834 is going to be coming. So look for a little pop and drop and then see what happens once he gives his speech. That's going to be key. Aapl is in a very critical state right now because Apple's been sinking and sinking and sinking like there's no tomorrow. Right now, it's actually just barely around 170. So it has a chance to bounce. But are we going to get a bounce or not? This depends on Powell. Tomorrow morning, we might see it just kind of shuffle, push a little bit, and shuffle around 170. But then Jerome Powell will determine, do we start pushing for 172 plus, or do we end up coming down to 168? I'll be watching for that as well, very carefully. So honestly, guys, who knows what Jerome Powell is about to do? He does have a tendency of causing some major volatility, so get ready for that and make sure you're prepared. With that said, I went over the main five I typically go over. Let's just conclude this video by talking about some more tickers on Webull. So I just want to mention that using our smaller charts, you guys can see that Tesla is still on a slight downtrend, still looking kind of weak. We may attempt to rebound just a little bit thanks to the wick below showing some liquidity being grabbed, but then we could come back down, and then Jerome Powell will determine where we go from there. On Tesla, and same thing with the SPY chart. SPY is the same thing. We're trying to hold our 50 EMA. Are we about to rebound a little bit and then come back down thanks to Powell and we start sinking, or does Powell help us break above 510? Be very careful, guys. We're still looking kind of weak, so be careful. Now, for Rivian, let's start off with Rivian first. Rivian is going to be testing 11.07. It looks kind of bullish right here. It might test that. If it breaks this, 11.6 is a real possibility, which is where we have this resistance. It looks like it may push a little bit, but just to be safe, let's see what Jerome Powell causes. SoFi looking kind of weak. It looks like it could drop a little bit more towards 7, and we'll see if we see buyers defend it around 7. Also, Jerome Powell is another factor. What he says about interest rates is important for lots of banks, lots of stocks which are similar to banks like SoFi, and a lot of stocks which are involved in the brokerage business. If we end up dropping towards 7, watch and see if we get a bounce or not. It looks like it could sink a bit more, so be very careful with this chart. For ARM, it's shuffling around the 50 EMA. If we end up holding above 134.5, Jerome Powell, if he helps this thing push above 138, we're bullish and 140 plus is coming. If we fail and reject and we lose 132, 130 is coming, followed by 128. Watch that very carefully. For Super Micro, this is starting to bounce. It came down as we predicted and ended up bouncing. So watch 1100. If we break that, watch 1155 and then 1200 above that, followed by 1250. Those are all going to be resistance levels from a psychological standpoint. So watch that very carefully. I think it's going to test at least 1150 tomorrow, and then we'll see if it rejects or not after Powell. So be very, very careful. For Palantir, okay, watch resistance around this 24 area. If we break 24, we could push a little bit higher. If we reject off this, we could come back down. So watch it carefully. It is showing some life. It looks like it wants to push to 24, but watch and see if we could hold above that after Powell. That's going to be key. Russell 2000 is still technically on an uptrend. It's been uptrending quite a bit, but now it's below its 20 EMA. So we're actually stuck between supply and demand. If it breaks 204.48. If we get that break, if Jerome Powell helps this thing break, we're going to be pushing back up to 207. If we lose 202 let me double check where this is, 202.8. If we lose that, a bigger drop is going to be coming all the way down to 200 or even below that. So watch that very carefully. For Microsoft stock is looking kind of weak right now. It's been sinking quite a bit, but we're at support at the 200 EMA at 400.83. If we bounce off this after Jerome Powell's speech and everything, we're heading back up to 409. If we lose this, we're going to be heading down to 395, if not below that. So it all depends on Powell. We'll see what he causes. Tomorrow it's going to likely rebound a bit, then come back down, and we'll see if we could keep pushing or not. Jerome Powell is going to play a big role. For AMD, we look kind of strong right now. Technicals show 210 could be coming, but just to be safe, if Powell causes a rug pull, 198 is coming. Technicals do look bullish, so it looks like it's going to push a little bit tomorrow morning, but we'll wait and see if Powell helps this thing continue to break out to 210 and eventually 215, or if we come back down to 198. With that being said, we also have a few more. We have Ford, kind of flat, despite the fact that bullish news came out, it's still kind of flat. We're holding 12.52. If we bounce off this, we could start pushing for 12.75 and eventually 13. If we lose this, 12.37 is coming, so watch that very carefully. For the VIX, we'll watch and see if this is a rejection on the 4-hour time frame. Are we about to reject and come down to fill the gap around 13.5, or are we about to continue breaking out above our 200 EMA? I don't know for sure, guys. We have a gap above here to fill too. It's in the middle. It is starting to reject a little bit, so I'm going to be open-minded, and we'll see what Jerome Powell causes. It does look like it's going to come down a bit as the market tries to bounce, but then we'll see if Powell causes an ultimate break in either direction, so watch that very carefully. For the dollar index, we're barely holding our 20 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. If we bounce off this, a bigger push could be coming towards the higher levels. Right over here. If we end up losing this, we're going to be seeing a bigger drop, so be very careful. We'll see how that goes. For Coinbase, right over here. Wait, hold on. Give me 1 second, guys. Going back to Coinbase. Coinbase is right about here. As far as the chart goes, I just want to note that Coinbase is currently around this previous resistance, which is now becoming support. So watch 223 as resistance. If we get a bounce thanks to Powell, 240 is coming. If we lose 216, we're going to be sinking towards 200 flat. So we'll just have to wait and see. For Google, on the 4-hour time frame, that's trying to turn, so it looks kind of bullish. It looks like it could be looking for 136. If that breaks, 138 is coming. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 130, but it looks kind of bullish to me from a technical standpoint. It looks like it might try to push, but this will also depend on Jerome Powell. So I think it might test 136 tomorrow, but then we'll see if we get a break or not. Jerome Powell will likely determine that. For Amazon, we're looking kind of bearish right now. It looks like it could sink a little bit lower towards 172, but just to be safe, we'll see if Jerome Powell helps it. Technicals do show, 171.1 is coming, but just to be safe, we'll see what Jerome Powell causes. For Meta, The 4 hour is looking kind of weak. We're going to be looking at support at 486. If we hold this, we could bounce. If we lose this, we could sink lower. So watch it very carefully. We're also very, very indecisive. If we lose 486, we're bearish. If we break 493, we're bullish. That's going to be determined by Jerome Powell. We may pop tomorrow towards 493, then come back down and trade sideways at 490. And we'll see if we get a break in either direction. Jerome Powell will determine that. With that being said, guys, Jerome Powell is very powerful. Many people say he's the biggest market maker, so he's going to determine which way the market goes, in my opinion. Expect some high volatility at 10 a.m. For Tesla, look for a little pop tomorrow and then a drop. That's the most likely possibility. Then we'll see what Jerome Powell causes. However, I do want to note that the news is also another big factor, so we'll see what the news says. I can't always predict the news, but that's what technicals are kind of suggesting for Tesla, at least going into tomorrow. So we'll see how it goes. With that being said, I thank all of you so much for listening. I hope you guys have an absolutely incredible rest of the day, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening. Take care, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning, and we'll be discussing how Tesla's looking alongside Jerome Powell's speech. Take care, do what you have to do, and peace out.